So we've talked a lot about ways you can look up public information regarding the environment online from the comfort of your own home in the middle of the night while you sit in your pajamas and your bedroom shoes at the computer. And that's all interesting, but sometimes there are going to be environmental problems that maybe don't rise to the level of a Superfund site, and maybe they will never be listed on the toxic release inventory, but they're still important to you. They're important to you, and they may affect your health or health of your family or health of people in your community, and you want to know more about them. So we're going to talk now a little bit about using open government laws to do your own research into environmental issues. This is sort of doing the legwork yourself instead of just going and looking up on a government website. Now, say you've got, for example, you've got a fish kill in your creek where a whole lot of fish just fall over and die and sort of go belly up. And it keeps happening over and over again, and you want to have answers. Or there's some weird smell in your community, in your neighborhood that you can't place, and you keep calling the city to get answers, and you keep getting the runaround. We're going to address some of that now. We're going to go a little bit deeper, basically. Depending on the environmental laws and regulations in your state, a lot of times industrial facilities, plants, power plants, water plants, sewage plants, utilities, that kind of thing, that give off some form of pollution either into the air or the water or the ground have to have permits from the state environmental authorities in order to discharge that material. So if you think you're having a problem from the outflow of wastewater from a particular industrial site or a utility plant that you think is putting off a lot of yucky smoke, I would go to my state's environmental regulators, and I'd like to see those permits. Let's take a look at the permits, and for example, say they dump wastewater into the creek. They probably would need a water discharge permit from the state, and it's very likely that that permit will specify sort of a maximum of how much they're allowed to dump, and that permit might the permit application that went with it might specify what kind of stuff they're allowed to dump. It might say that they're not allowed to dump certain stuff, and if they're caught dumping that certain stuff they're not supposed to dump, they could be in trouble. So I would start by going and looking at those permits. I'd go and I'd find out when they applied for the permit. I'd get the application. I'd actually look at the permit. I'd ask if the permit was renewed. For example, I would check to make sure that all the steps were followed in the permitting process. You know, if the law says that there's supposed to be a hearing or a period of public comment before the permit was issued, was that followed? Were people in the community given adequate notice? Were they given the requisite amount of time to register a complaint or opposition to this permit being issued? I would check all of those things. Another thing I would ask for in terms of public records, I would ask for any fines or disciplinary action that's been taken against that facility. For example, have they ever gotten in trouble? Have they ever been fined for dumping stuff they weren't supposed to dump? Have they ever been fined for dumping too much stuff? If they were fined, did they pay the fine? Did the state forgive any of the fine? Is any of the fine outstanding and still needs to be paid? I would check on all those kind of things. You could also ask for the results of any tests in terms of air, water, or ground pollution that would be performed on the site or outside the site to determine if they're following their permits. Now, it could be that no tests have been performed. In talking to a couple of good friends of mine who are longtime environmental journalists, one thing they told me was that basically don't assume that every body of water everywhere gets regularly tested by your local health department or environmental officials. We live in an era where we tend to assume that somebody just goes out and sticks a test tube in every creek and ditch in the world, and comes up with a report about what kind of microbes and organisms are living there. In reality, there are so many bodies of water that it's very unlikely that the environmental authorities in any state are going to be doing regular testing of every creek there is. So don't assume that they go out and do them all on a regular basis. So there may not be tests that have been run, but if I were you, if when I worded my open records request to that agency, I would just ask to see what kind of tests were performed, were any tests performed, did they come back positive, negative, what were the findings, those kinds of things. Now you could also, if you want to kind of go one level deeper, you could also ask for access under the public records laws in your state. You could ask to see emails and communications between environmental officials in your community regarding that plant or that site. Or maybe you could ask for emails and communications between environmental regulators and the people who work at that company. For example, you could see if, how thoroughly did the state actually investigate the complaint that you lodged that pollution was coming out of a particular industrial site. Did the state inspector just send an email to his friend over there and said, hey, somebody's been griping about that smell y'all got coming out there. What is that? And then the industrial guy writes back and says, oh, it's nothing, don't worry about it. And then they dropped it. Well, you might want to know that. So you can ask for access to those emails as well. As I said earlier, the laws vary from state to state about what's public and what's not. I can't guarantee you that the laws in your state would say that those emails are public record. They might be, they might not be, it just kind of depends. But if you're interested to know what I might ask for or ask to get access to, that would be a list of, on my list of possibilities of things that I might want to see. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. One is that sometimes there is overlap in terms of environmental regulation between what you might think of as an environmental issue on the one hand and what you might think of as a health issue. Some things are regulated, maybe not by environmental agencies in every state, but by health departments in those states. For example, in some states, the quality of drinking water is regulated not by the environmental agency, but by the state health department. I think that's the case in Tennessee and maybe in Texas as well. So if you want to see data about what kind of stuff might be in your drinking water, you wouldn't go to the State Department of Environment Conservation, you would go to the State Health Department. So keep that in mind. If you ask for records from one agency and they don't have them, I would hope that they would be kind enough to just write you a polite note back to say, we don't have these, actually this other agency can help you with that. Can't guarantee that, but we certainly hope it. One other overlap thing to keep in mind is this. In some cases, in some states, environmental issues, pollution, can rise to the level of a criminal case, where somebody can actually be threatened with jail or possibility of jail or fine for having done something they shouldn't have done, like dumping stuff out illegally into the ground or in the water. When you're talking about asking for access to records regarding a pending criminal matter, that can get kind of dicey. The public records laws in many states give the authorities, police, prosecutors, other commissioned law enforcement agencies, which is sometimes can include agents, police officers who work for your state environmental authorities, give them broad leeway in many cases to withhold just about any and all record that pertains to a pending criminal matter. So if you've got really bad smell in your neighborhood, your subdivision, it keeps happening over and over again, you can go ask for records from your state Environment Conservation Department. But if the people who are dumping the stuff out are being investigated criminally for dumping that stuff out, it may be harder for you to get the records that you're looking for, at least until someone is charged with a crime, at which point you can then go to the court clerk's office, and ask to see the affidavit and the warrants and those kind of paperwork that are normally filed with a criminal matter. And if you want to see other information, well, authorities may have it, but they may not be required to make it public to you until after that case is adjudicated. Until that case is heard and that person either pleads guilty, pleads not guilty, and they go to trial, they're acquitted, they're convicted, the case is dropped, until there's some sort of outcome, basically. So keep that in mind. That could make things a little bit harder for you to get hold of. Another piece of advice that my environmental reporter friends gave to me that I want to pass on to you. A lot of times people have something in their neighborhood, such as maybe fish dying in the creek or a particularly bad smell, and they don't realize that they're the first people, that they don't realize that nobody has actually called to report it to the authorities. Say it keeps happening over and over again, well, you may not necessarily be able to just think that, well, nobody seems to be doing it